Welcome. You are listening to the Be a Better Being podcast hosted by Michelle Zellner and Sasha Berscheid. Michelle and Sasha are here to give you information and inspiration to help you live your healthiest, happiest lives. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings. Thank you for tuning in to the Be a Better Being podcast. I'm Michelle Zellner, your host. I'm hosting solo today, but I have a really fantastic guest that I'm super excited to learn more about and really to learn more about what he does. I am excited to introduce to you Donald Kipp, who is the founder of Neuroenergetic Release. Don, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on the Be a Better Being podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I like better beings, so it's a good place to be.
Well, thank you. I have a feeling that you help a lot of people be better beings. So I know that I don't know what neuroenergetic release is. I'm guessing most of my listeners don't know what it is. But when I saw that it is to help you really live a life pain-free, it really struck a chord with me because as somebody who dealt with chronic pain for a very long time, I understand what that life is like. And I know there are so many people who suffer with chronic pain. So if you could just tell us, I mean, we'll get into the details, but an overview of neuroenergetic release. Where did it come from? What are the roots of it? Give us a little bit about that. And then we'll get into more detail about it.
Okay. So we don't have 3 hours, so I'll try to make it the brief version. But neuroenergetic release is a alternative medicine system, manual therapy, meaning usually I touch people. So I'm working with my hands on people. But as the title says, neuroenergetic release, and that kind of sums it up. It's nervous system, energetic system, and it releases imbalance, patterns of imbalance, things that are less than perfect in the body. And it really does this head to foot, fingertips to toes, and does it very quickly. So, and using control systems, not force. So there's no force applied. The points I touch on the body, I'm just touching. I'm not pushing or manipulating or adjusting. Physically, just giving the body information to change, and the body changes on its own. It just needs a little help, a little new information. So in as little as a second or a minute, people will have physical change that they'll be able to feel, and you can actually see a lot of this. So when I say patterns, these patterns you can see in the physical body, things like high shoulder, high hip, low hip, then twist and rotation, and it gets a lot more detailed, but I look at the physical body and I look for these patterns, and that tells me what's going on with people and how to work with them.
That is fascinating. And it sounds like a very gentle approach and gentle modality. I know, sometimes like getting chiropractic adjustment or going through some physical therapy things can be a little bit uncomfortable and painful. Is this it sounds like it's very mild when it
and
comes to
that's
maybe
one of
the
the goals
patient
actually. And
experience.
so we're working with control systems. So we're not forcing anything, just giving the body information on how to change. So the body is only going to do what it can do, and not more or less than that, because it's not being forced. It's being given information, and the body's in control of its own healing. So gentle, yes. And again, that is a goal because the body only has one response to pain. So if anything is actually painful, it's counterproductive. So therapies, I would say, that produce any pain are counterproductive, because the only response the body has to pain is to contract and tighten. And that's really what you're trying to release, not contribute to.
Right. Well, I'm super curious how you discovered this, how you learned the practice, and give us a little story on that.
Well, this is going back 30 years now. I was in my late 20s, and in my late 20s, I was pre-med. I had gone back to school. I was going to become a medical doctor. And I was working one summer as a carpenter to help pay the bills, and I bent over one too many times and I ruptured a disc in my back. So I had pretty severe pain, and that persisted for months. Couldn't work, couldn't do a lot. And part of that process was, going to Western medical doctors, going to alternative care, and in the process and doing things like physical therapy and chiropractic and massage. And what happened was the medical stuff was making me worse, and they couldn't answer some questions that I thought they should be able to, like, how come, looking down at my feet, one foot turns out the other points is straight ahead, my toes are splayed on one foot and not the other, things like that. And as well as having pain in my back and down my leg and buttocks and all the way, and pain and numbness all the way to my foot. So, and then they did things that later I learned were actually contraindicated, like putting heat on inflammation, hot packs. Medically, they didn't have a whole lot to do, especially at that time. So anyways, that led me to kind of put the medical stuff, the pre-med, on hold. I explored alternative stuff, which I had already been doing, and I studied more and more that way, and eventually decided to go that route. So I had fairly good advanced anatomy and physiology in Western education, and then also studied alternative stuff. And then I was doing that, and one day had an epiphany where I was doing other things that people might have heard of, like neuromuscular therapy or myofascial release. And I had a patient who had multiple ruptured discs in his back. He has 2 in his neck, 1 in his upper back, 2 in his lower back, in a lot of pain. And he was in his 60s, and he had that hunched over, head forward, old man posture. And I put together a lot of things that I had been seeing and feeling, these points and these patterns and breath, which was one of the things I'd studied in a number of different things alternatively. And that patient went from in a lot of pain and all hunched over in this old man posture, and to out of pain and standing like a 20-year-old Marine in 45 minutes. That was unprecedented, still is. And that was the start of neuroenergetic release. So I had put these different things together, and I knew they had a profound effect. I had taken copious notes as in my practice. I knew what I'd done. And then I went about repeating it, and repeated it and with patient after patient. And every patient since then has taught me something. And they're all different, and they all have different patterns. There are similarities to patterns, but they all have their own individual nuance. So when I work with somebody, for the most part, it is individually, except there's a few instances like I might do a group session, but I don't want to get into that too much right now. But so usually it's individual, results are very quick. That's kind of the founding of it. But again, everything has been refined. And today, that what happened in that 45-minute session can happen in as little as 1 second today. So everybody I treat, I evaluate them, I get their history, I find out what's going on, what their goals are, and I treat them for 1 minute or less, from 1 minute to 1 second, depending on the person. And I'll have them stand. They'll be able to feel the change, reduced pain, dysfunction, increased energy, change in affect, emotions. All of those things happen in a minute or less, and that happens with 99+% of the people. So
That is remarkable. Were you able to solve your own back pain issue with this, or how did you get out of your
My
situation?
back pain situation kind of predated that. I was already fairly out of pain by the time I'd gotten to this, and had, from the other things I had learned, had been able to get help and be helped and help myself. I was able to further my healing and be more functional and have less pain and do more things, and actually continue to do athletics. And you know up to a few years ago, I was still like riding my bike pretty intensely, up mountains, and up Mount Evans was one of my, or past Echo Lake was one of my favorite rides, actually.
Wow.
So
For those who don't live in Colorado, that's a very high mountain.
yeah, so people can recover, and I've had many patients with ruptured discs, and probably, help more people with that. Than maybe that's the number one thing, that it's one of the high things that I see. But I also see things like respiratory stuff, digestive stuff are really big. So asthma on one end, digestive stuff from heartburn to more serious stuff like Crohn's disease or diverticulitis, different things can all be helped. It's usually the same pattern, no matter what digestive thing or what respiratory thing. It's kind of a bigger pattern. And then again, there are nuances with everybody. So
That is fascinating. So, what is the underlying principle behind it? So, when I think of, you know, ruptured disc, a digestive issue, how does simply touching somebody change it?
So it's the underlying principle is, our bodies have a place where they function best. And if you I look at their structure, and that structure has an ideal. So I look at where that people would vary from that. So in a ruptured disc, you will actually see curves in the spine, either front to back, sideways, and usually twist also. So all three planes. And then those asymmetries put a lot more pressure on discs than they're meant or designed by the higher power that created us all. More pressure than they're designed to handle, you could say, if you look at it from a mechanic kind of viewpoint. And so that pressure wears them out over time. Sometimes people have an event that triggers a disc injury, but it's usually wear and tear over time. And then the event can even be sneezing, or like in my case, it was bending over. Prior to the rupturing the disc, I had 10 years of pain, which I know goes back to a ski accident 10 years earlier where I nearly broke my neck. But I was young and male and at 18 at that point. So I just brushed myself off and kind of discounted it.
Of course you did, because
Right.
because you're invincible.
So, but anyways, wear and tear due to asymmetries, giving the body needs to change, but it's holding this pattern, and it needs to change the whole thing at once. So it needs somebody to give it information on how to do that. When it does that, it lets go of that pattern, which is really part of the body's self-defense mechanism. The other thing, I look at things from, like, Western rehab and stuff. They're talking about really deficits, and they look at deficits and are trying to reprogram the nervous system through neuroplasticity, create new nerve paths. What I look at is how the body shuts nerve pathways down or modifies them to hold these patterns. And so in my case, I'm turning on pathways that are shut down. So again, like things with head injuries, which is another thing I work with, even people who are 30 years past their injury, in one session will have noticeable cognitive changes and neural functional changes. And I'm touching points on their body, but that those points in turn can refer dysfunction into the brain, into the nervous system. So it's not always so much brain injury as it's brain dysfunction. And even again, 30 years later, we can improve upon that situation.
That is incredible. I think about all the people I know in my life that have had head injuries, me included, many concussions as a gymnast growing up. And then unfortunately, I was famous for the 3
Well,
point
we have
landing
something in
that's
common
2
there.
feet in the head.
We've done that.
Yeah, and then I had a snowboarding accident and a nasty spill on a bike and a car accident, and I am a little concerned about my cognitive functioning in the future. So it's, I mean, that's, I think gives me a lot of hope to know that should I be experiencing something, I have somebody in literally my backyard that maybe I can go for help. Are there any things that really what you do cannot fix? And at what
Well,
point
there's
do you recognize
limitations,
that?
and hmm, well, I say when anybody has an injury, there's always an emotional component to it. Now, it may be 99% physical and 1% emotional, or it could be the other way around. And I know over time, having analyzed people on many different levels, that again, these patterns that I look at physically can also point to emotional imbalance or emotional trauma. So sometimes while people are on my table, they'll have memories pop up or feelings pop up. They might cry, they might laugh, and sometimes they're done with the emotional part. That shifts too. Other times they're not, and they need more help on that level. So that might be therapy, or it might be some other type of system that addresses emotional imbalance. So sometimes that's needed. And even on a physical level, there are, I would say I've been successful in the high 90% of everybody I've seen. But to what extent I can get somebody can be limited to by physical or other things going on with them. They might have an underlying condition, a genetic condition, things like cancer. I mean, I never ever claimed to cure cancer or cure anything actually, but I've helped people with the side effects of cancer, like when their digestion was shut down, being able to turn that back on, and reduce their pain and improve their respiratory function, so they lived longer and had a more quality life. But so there's all sorts of limitations, and with certain bony injuries, or where they have no cartilage left in a joint or something, or it's fused, there are limitations, but it can help.
Yeah.
I think pretty much everyone to some degree. So
Yeah, I think about my own experience, not very far removed a couple of years ago. And I was a gymnast, as I mentioned, and then, just lived life and had chronic back pain. And I just thought, well, I was a gymnast. That's just what you get. And, I live a very active life. So I do all the stretching and the foam rolling and the massage and the this and the that. And my back pain, I just figured this is just what I was going to live with. And it's fine. It's not debilitating me. I'm still living my life. It just hurts. And then a couple of years ago, I mean, it was always my left side. It was excruciating. And then it started getting into my piriformis, and then it was seizing up my quad. And then, I mean, everything, everything, everything. And this is during COVID. So everybody's closed. I can't go get my normal treatments that usually keep it manageable. And because I'm not going to not do something, I'm also still being active. But of course, your body is in now a compensatory pattern because it hurts to do it this way. So it's going to alter and do it this way, causing other things to have issues. So finally, when things open back up, I go get all my treatments, my chiropractic, my dry needling, my massage, my everything. And it kind of helped it for like a day or two. But so at some point I was like, okay, there is something more here. And even my therapists and practitioners were like, look, all the things we're doing should be helping. So I finally called in the Western docs and we got some x-rays and I needed new hips. I mean, I had severe osteodegeneration in my left hip, and that had probably been going on since my early to mid 20s. And as soon as I got a new left hip, I had zero back pain, zero, none. Right. And so I think that to your point, like getting to the root of the problem too is really critical. And I always encourage people that body awareness is so important. And if you're doing all the things that should be helping and it's not helping, then there is something else going on. And we might need to explore what that something else is. Is that your experience too, or am I missing something?
No, I think people should always seek out as much information as possible. I say more data is good. And, your example of hip being worn out to the point of bone on bone. And that's what I was referring to when I said no cartilage left in a joint. And there are people who get to that point and they do need joint replacements. I wish I'd seen you earlier in your life. We could have prevented that.
Oh, yeah. Me too. Never once did anybody say, I wonder if you have issues with your hips. I had back pain, right? So that's what you treat. Now, I have hip dysplasia, as the x-rays showed, which 20% of females do. I'm not sure about the percentage of men, which is great for being flexible, but it's not great for stability and for alignment. And so you take really bad genetic structure and you do 10 years of a very demanding, physically demanding on your body sport on that. And yeah, you get new hips when you're 48, right? But I thought that too. If somebody had said, let's do an x-ray head to toe, see what's going on. Oh, Michelle, you have some hip dysplasia. You have some degeneration going on. We need to modify what you're doing. We need to start doing things differently. We need to strengthen this and stop doing that. It maybe would have decreased, the rate at which they degenerated. Who knows? But yeah, for 20 years, I chased back pain when the root cause of it was because I had degenerated hips, which caused everything to shift and be out of alignment and then go into that protection mode, which is to lock down. And yeah, the temporary relief and release that I got from massage or dry needling, but it was temporary because the body goes back to what it knows and where it's safe and protection. So believe me, when the doctor's like, oh, you just need some new hips, I'm like, wow. Yeah, if I had this scan when I was 26, 27 years old, and we would have seen already the degeneration happening, well, we could probably have corrected a whole bunch of things along the way to prevent it or at least reduce it.
Well, I think we could have prevented it. That's been my experience. And that's not what even the doctors that helped you look at. And like, if you bring in your x-rays, I can show you things they never mentioned because they don't look at it. They're not trained to look at it. And so the wear and tear. So what is degeneration? It's not a normal process. So every part of your body, every tissue in your body is regenerating all the time. And what degeneration is, joint degeneration, is when you're wearing it out faster than it can regenerate. And that's not a normal process. And you'll see people your same age and even who did the same stuff and maybe even had the hip dysplasia who don't have hip replacement, So there's other factors that come in. And that's what I look at it. And that's what ideally, I try to correct. Sometimes people ask me, so what's your ideal patient? And if I had to answer that question, it would be an infant, days old, because that is a population I've treated. And in an infant, oftentimes there can be things that are out of balance, and things that show up in infants are eye problems, ear infections, just being crabby, having colic, digestive problems. And those usually go back to birth trauma. And that birth trauma, carrying it one step further, is usually mostly the head and neck. And that's where most of the trauma is if you think of the birth process. Even a C-section, which is not, especially an emergency one, isn't more gentle. It's actually traumatic in different ways. And some of the beneficial physiological processes aren't present in that too. So, but anyways, an infant, days old, weeks old, I can treat in seconds and minutes, and they're balanced, and that stuff doesn't have to get worse over time. They don't have to go through a lifetime. Of course, then everything becomes cumulative too. So you might have birth trauma, and then you might have injuries later, and they can be falls, they can be, falling off the swings or the monkey bars or whatever, or they can be, more serious, like car accidents, things like that. But all that stuff becomes cumulative too. But still, it'd be nice to see everybody at the beginning of their life and give them a good start.
Yeah. So 2 questions. One, is there anything that an individual can do to somewhat self-treat? And 2, I mean, you're here in Colorado. Not everybody's going to come visit you. Are there other people? Have you taught this strategy, this practice to others, that they are now doing this in their practices as well around the country? So,
Yeah. So there are things people can do themselves, and I teach some of those. I have a couple of tools that every patient I see, I teach them a 1-minute practice. Should take them about a minute a day, and that helps them rebalance their body from the daily stuff that can throw us off. I encourage people, usually I see people for a short period of time, like 4 to 8 sessions over, like once a week. And then, but I encourage them, once they're stable and reach their optimum, to come in for a tune-up. And an average person might be once every 6 months. Some athletes or people who are harder on their bodies might be, every couple of months or once a month even, or some underlying conditions might require that too. But, and for other people, the part that I alluded to when I do a group session is, so it's neuroenergetic release. And so what can happen is that we can use just energy. So I actually see people on Zoom, and I can do most of what I do in person, over the phone or on a Zoom session. And that's where I get into the group things. And I've known I knew for 30 years, since I founded this, that I was working with energy. I could feel that. And 20 years ago, I've usually promoted my practice through live lectures and demonstrations. And so I was demonstrating on somebody, and I was showing people this pattern. And I had what pop into my head, the thought that happens occasionally, where I just have kind of a thought or a knowing. And the question was, what would happen if I just thought about touching the points instead of actually touching them? And so I used my intent and my thoughts to touch the points. And that person in that live lecture actually changed in a few minutes, just like everybody else did, without touching them.
Well, that's amazing. I think you're gonna have a whole bunch of people reaching out to you to see how that works, and if you can help them in that way. That's incredible. Are you teaching this to other practitioners?
So I've taught other practitioners in the past, and I went on hiatus from that for a number of years for a number of reasons. But now Universe has been pushing me really hard to start teaching again. So that's actually why I'm doing interviews and things like that again. is to get things out in a bigger way and to find those students who want to learn it again. And when I say students, they got to be pre-qualified, and they got to have some background in the healing arts, from doctors to chiropractors to physical therapists, occupational therapists, massage therapists, physician's assistants. All of those I've taught before. And that's the population. And then they got to have the desires and the commitment to learn. And I'm only doing master classes now, which will be a year long over multiple modules. And I want them to be able to do everything I can do to actually master the program, not just dabble in it and then combine it with other things and do other things and get distracted. So it takes a lot for me to teach somebody, and the energetic exchange is important too. So I need committed individuals, and that's why I stopped teaching before, because I wasn't getting the right population of students. So,
well, I think the work you're doing is incredible, and I know it can help so many people. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing and letting us all learn together about what this is. And yeah, we're definitely going to put all your contact information in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Is there anything before we officially wrap up? Anything else?
I think we covered things pretty thoroughly. We actually had quite a bit of time, so that was great. Nothing that I have. If there's any other question that you have to wrap up, I'm happy to go there. But I think we covered the basics, and people can find me on my website. They can find me on Facebook. My website is body-awareness.com. That's my best contact information and a place to reach me to start. So.
Perfect. Well, Don, thank you so much. And I know, because I know people, there are some people listening who are totally skeptical, thinking, whatever, that's a bunch of woo-woo nonsense. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. But you know what I know? I know that our Western medicine is not the answer. Not always. Sometimes it is. Not always. Or it is only part of the answer. And if what you're doing isn't solving your issue, why not try something different? The worst it's going to be is that it didn't work for you. Maybe it is. Maybe it's going to be that thing that changes your life. So as you all go on the rest of your day and choose to be a better being, I hope you think about that, especially if you are either currently suffering with or any kind of chronic pain, or if unfortunately that happens to be in your future. Bookmark this one, come back and listen, and reach out to Don and just see what he's got to say and what he can do. I know I'm personally going to be making a visit because I'm very fascinated and curious. And I always like to, kind of be a guinea pig and learn from my own experiences so that I can share with others as well. So with all of that, thank you everybody for tuning in today.
Right.
I hope you will go and
thank you. Have those, and all those better beings have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. Michelle and Sasha hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you enjoyed the content, please help spread their message by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.